Brad Smith is with us again. Good morning, Brad. Congratulations on your latest success, and we're happy to have you back on Choose Views. How you been, man?
Hey, Richard. Good morning. I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and I enjoyed hearing what you were just talking about because I couldn't agree more, and I feel like you must have been on the doors with me having conversations with people locally because that mirrors a lot of what I've been hearing and talking about exactly on the ground here with people of all backgrounds.
hmm Yeah, I mean, listen, I made this comment, and this is just to kind of give you some perspective. People want to throw all kinds of shade at Dr. Syed over in Michigan, one of our neighboring states, since
Right.
we're the Midwestern Great Lakes states. And I'm like, listen, he's got folks from all different factions that are joining his campaign right now. He's
Right.
talking to people because of what they want to get done. They could give a darn. The people that are following him, they could give a darn about his faith. In fact, they advocate his faith because they understand that he's committed to it. And, so the same thing for you, affordability when it comes to this economy, education, protecting the rights of rural Wisconsin folk. I mean, you've been all about that. You've been really clear that this is what you're fighting for. And I think that I'm loving hearing that candidates that are running, and I'm not labeling like whether they're DSA or they're progressive liberal Democrats or they're moderate Democrats, but the folks that are winning, Brad, are folks that are they're like, let me listen to what these folks are trying to say because we kind of haven't really been listening. We've been telling them what we're going to do versus what do they want us to do. Talk to us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much, and I couldn't agree more. I think there is so much frustration about the party politics, the national power consolidation, whether you're talking about monopolies or large influence of money into our politics through the forms of Citizens United. And so I got to tell you, people are feeling left behind and unheard. And I know it's funny going and actually talking to people is the job, right? When we talk about what I'm running for, it's in the name.
hmm
It's representative. It's not to be something at a national level. It's not to be a rage bait author, right? Your job is to represent the people's interests, and that actually means everybody on the ground here. And while I am very much a Democrat and eager to do everything we can to serve our people here, my job is also to find the through line of how I better represent everyone in this district. And I am so heartened by the conversations I've had. Man, there is a lot in common when you sit down with people, when you talk about housing, when you talk about the cost of everything right now, raising a family, healthcare, insurance. People are feeling this left, right, and center. And that gives us so much opportunity if we can
Yep.
figure out how to actually move forward in our own interests, right? But we have to figure out how to get to people and talk about that.
One of the and thank you for that. And we're going to stay on this point for a second because I look at it like this. Um, if you and I are out together on the campaign trail knocking doors and we roll up at a predominantly white community, what I want them to understand is that I'm here to help you win to get the things that they're going to need irrespective of their culture. And they may have
Right.
some bias toward a variety of things, but at the end of the day, you want to go in and help that community get what they believe or what they feel they need. Flip the script. You and I go into a
Yeah.
predominantly African American community, and they're like, so who's this black dude and this white dude knocking on my door? Well, the conversation is about how this white dude wants to go to Washington and make sure that you get the things that you are supposed to have based on what you've told us that you think you need and that you want as a citizen of this community. And I think that that's my message, Brad. I'm not trying to say that that's your message, but in the bigger picture, I think that that's how we cut through some of the bias is to say, listen, I could care less what you look like. As a representative, I want to go in and get the stuff that you say you need and make sure that all the folks in this community are taken care of. I mean, is that a fair argument?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've been on 10,000 doors already leading up to the primary through my kind of team and grassroots. And, I've done a very substantial portion of that. And that's exactly the way we've approached it is, you know, um, people have foundational needs. You talk about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. People are struggling with the first of that,
Mm,
life, right? And
hmm
we're nowhere near for a lot of folks feeling confident that they're able to pursue happiness. And yet, so many people have been pre-programmed to go first to partisanship rather than to talk about their own interests. And I'm not really satisfied to let people, be snowed on that. And so I'm trying to pop that bubble with conversations, and I'm not going to apologize for trying to look out for your interests and doing everything I can to fight for the base needs that every family here needs. And I don't, it doesn't matter your socioeconomics, your background, where you live, your zip code, your wealth level. Everybody needs these things, and yet we're increasingly see these support structures be kicked out.
Hmm.
And people like Glenn Grothman, the current representative, are architects of that, right?
Yeah.
And but we have to get back to the conversation. Say, I'm not trying to give everything away. I'm trying to make sure you're fed, you have shelter, your family has opportunity, and you can be healthy enough to have a job that you can raise a family or pursue the pursuit of happiness on, right? And
Yeah.
those aren't controversial, and those sure as heck aren't partisan.
No, and one of the things that's unfortunately happening, I know that you see this because you're the one that's actually running. I see it from my vantage point, and that is that it's almost like there needs to be this a moment where I'm going to use a theme from one of the Avengers movies when when Thor drops the hammer. All this craziness is going on, right?
Yep.
All this noise, this craziness, and all this, and then Thor drops the hammer, and everything shuts down, and everybody comes back to their sanity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what our party has the opportunity to do right now is to drop the hammer and say, let's just stop this doggone craziness. And we all have a vested interest in working to make sure that we all are getting better and that we are not just surviving, that we are thriving, to take the line from Kamala Harris. But that's really what we have to do. And that's why, I've used a phrase and others that I know that are in my circle have used the words, we have to come in, ready to drop the hammer and say, no, we're going to set this thing right.
Yeah, and be unapologetically bold in the vision we're talking about. Which, by the way, when we talk about things like Medicare for all, here that's such a provocative, intriguing, and exciting comment for so many. And yet, look at every other high income nation.
Yeah.
They're already on this track, and they have been for years. And by the way, their health outcomes are better. Their life expectancy is better. I think it's time to have that moment where we say, wait a minute, it can be done here. We are the largest economy, we're the wealthiest nation, and yet we don't have these foundational support structures that we ought to, because we're pursuing things like a $1.5 trillion budget for another forever war that no one's weighed in on, and frankly nobody wants. I got to
Mm-mm.
tell you, I've talked to a lot of people, Democrats, conservatives alike. Nobody wants this, right? And
Yeah.
yet we're spending more money than ever on this.
Brett, are you seeing, speaking of the I guess you could say the political labeling in terms of Republican, Democrat,
Yeah.
moderate, independent, whatever, are you seeing Republicans who right now, if we look at, how Wisconsin went in the last national election and how other states that we would want to say, wait a minute, what are you thinking? You're the folks that are going to be hurt the most by some of this craziness that's coming.
Right.
Are you actually seeing folk who may have voted for Trump or may have voted Republican in the last cycle or cycles saying this just isn't working. I can't keep doing this. Are you actually, because I get data and information and whatnot that say that that's happening, but
Right.
I want to know from you in Wisconsin of all places, is that
Yep.
real or is it just out there as a conversation piece?
Yeah, it absolutely is real. And naturally not going to name names, but we have built a grassroots team of volunteers, of people who are reaching out that are saying, "Hey, I care deeply about where you're talking about going, and I want to be a part of this." Right? And as part of that, we sit down and have chats and understand people's backgrounds. And I've had a wide array of people come and join and talk about volunteering and sit down, including people who have fallen out of the MAGAsphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about people who are even of a level of being working in DC as a consultancy, someone who had worked with a governor level MAGA affiliated campaign and office, as well as someone who is a former staffer for a GOP person in Congress, GOP member or congressional member. And there's been different reasons why they've fallen out. For one, it was because of the ICE shootings. And when that happened, they just said, okay, this is it. This was my red line.
Mm-hmm.
Americans being killed on the streets by people wearing masks, without due process and such aggressive tactics. That was one that was a red line for one person. And for another person now talking about the war in Iran and the fact that we were promised not to get another forever war, they said this is enough. And a third conversation I just had at a county fair in Washera County, which is one of our most rural, was that one of the largest farmers up there, they were falling out because they lost faith, and they saw the people that were surrounding the president and the fact that it was all yes people with not enough experience. And it's clear that their decision making is flawed, and they lost confidence. Right. So I have literal people I've talked to one-to-one who have dropped out and even talked about volunteering or started volunteering.
Yeah. Wow. I can see a person, man or woman, that's a farmer in any part of the country, but let's stay with Wisconsin because that's where you're rolling. I could see them sitting back going, would I put a young guy or gal at the wheel of a tractor to do the work in the field that doesn't have experience? They got a driver's license, but they've never gotten behind the wheel of one of these big, massive, wonderful pieces of equipment and let them start, operating it. And I could see that owner of that business, that farming, rural farming business, probably has some moments where he or she, if they're being honest with themselves, saying, I wouldn't put them in that person, an experienced person in charge of running this $1,000 piece of equipment that could cause some harm any more than people around Trump, to your point, need to be doing what they're doing because they're just as inexperienced and potentially reckless. So those are my words again, Brad, but I'm sure you probably had those kinds of conversations that may have been kind of salty with a few of those farmers.
Yeah. They're especially, a lot of these large farm operations, they're sophisticated too. I was talking with them. I went to a Farmers Bureau meeting in rural Green Lake County, which is in the center part of my district here. And it was right when the Iran war was kicking off. And one of them commented, hey, Strait of Hormuz, not only is that a control choke point for fuel and things like diesel prices, which is one of the critical inputs for a ton of our economy, not to mention, of course, farming. The other point was fertilizer and fertilizer prices, and the fact that he said to me a third of all urea goes through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a key fertilizer component. He talked about wishing having bought future contracts to help mitigate the costs that were going to come down the pike with this. And then he was questioning the logic and the foresight of the economic, havoc that was going to be wrought by putting the Strait of Hormuz on the table as a choke point, right? So some of these folks, man, they are looking far ahead. And the fact that he has those kind of discussions, it seems that our president wasn't aware or thinking of them or listening to people who did.
Yeah.
I think that's a moment where they're like, hey, large scale operation and proud business owner, but in Wisconsin, and knows more about the geopolitical reality and economics than our president and the people he's listening to, which is bonkers, right?
Yeah. It totally is, man. Brad, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the same topics, and we'll talk a little bit about the dude that you're running against. The number is 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu. Keep it locked in. We'll be right back with more of Chu's Views. All right, guys, welcome back to Chu's Views. If you're just tuning in, we are talking with Brad Smith, who's running for Wisconsin's 6th congressional district, and he has his thumb on what's really going on with folks in Wisconsin on all levels in terms of economics, community, socially, and just has an understanding that he's a veteran, he's a dad, he's a business leader. He knows who the people are in the community that he's representing, and certainly that throughout the rest of the state, that we've got to be listening and we've got to be taking the things that the community wants to Washington or to the State House and getting those things done first, because that's what the folks there are asking of us. One of the things that's going on right now, we just were talking about this war in Iran, and we didn't even get into talk about tariffs. We can talk about that too, but one of the biggies right now, he just rolled his. You all should have seen that. He could have lit a fire with the way his eyes just rolled.
I'm showing my beliefs and thoughts here, Richard.
But no, I mean, obviously, this gentleman that you spoke of, and others that I'm sure have had similar kinds of eye rolls because of the way in which this administration has not gotten it done. But let's talk about data centers, because I know that the guy that you're running against, and I'm trying not to even give him the competition, but the person
Yeah.
that you're running against can't even find it in himself to say, or to even have this conversation. Walk us through, Brett, where you are when it comes to data centers and then data centers in Wisconsin, and your thoughts and what the impact is going to be. Walk us through this.
Yeah, man, this is such an important and rapidly accelerating topic here in Wisconsin and frankly across the country. Two of the largest data centers and the first ones that came into Wisconsin were here in the 6th District, one in Port Washington, just north of us through Vantage Project
Right.
and part of the Stargate initiative, and the other one's Meta over in Beaver Dam. And boy, they have been done so rapidly and under the cover of darkness without any actual material community engagement that people felt that they had a voice and an opportunity to understand how it was going to impact their families and their communities. That is a consistent theme, again, that's bipartisan. There's an outrage about extractive development by the externally billion-dollar capitalized companies, and they're feeling left behind holding the bag. And the reason why is there's been no transparency about what the water impacts and water usage would be, which here in the Great Lakes, of course, water
Yeah.
is one of our most precious natural resources, and we must be good stewards of it. There's also massive questions about what new power is it going to require and who's going to pay for it. And until the public had an opportunity to start pushing back, companies are going to do what big companies do. They were trying to let families have to pay
Mm-hmm.
for the increased power costs, to pay for the new transmission lines. And that is absurd. People already stretched to the breaking point because of the tariffs and everything else going on. And now you're talking about us paying to feed the power for these massive data centers that we didn't ask for. It's wild. And one last thing I'll note is whether I drive north or west in my district, I drive past one of these hyperscale data centers, and it just is wild because they're these gargantuan things. It reminds me of the War of the Worlds when you had these big spaceships landing from out of nowhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
like spaceships from Planet Billionaire here in our wonderful Wisconsin backyard that nobody saw coming. So we need to get responsible regulations in place for consistent hurdles that these things can never go in under the cover of darkness of an NDA before communities have a chance to weigh in, to make sure that ratepayers are protected, to make sure our natural resources are protected, and among a number of other things. And we got to do it yesterday.
Yeah, that's the key yesterday because we've unfortunately fallen a little bit behind in this space, and it's about to be a lot behind. I almost said that the
Right.
wrong way, but it's good. It's the best. But and you may be aware of this, and if you're not, I'm going to drop this one on you just because it's a part of the bigger conversation. The NAACP, and I talked about this last week here on my show. The NAACP has joined in a lawsuit down in Mississippi and Memphis because of the XAI center, the data center that's been there, kind of the same way you describe in the under the cover of darkness, et cetera, and it's up and running. And one woman was interviewed, and she said she's basically across the street from where this place is fenced in. That that it sounds like jet engines running all the time, but not taking off. So it's that idling sound of a turbine engine. And she said it's not. And then that's one thing, and the other part is the impact. So that's the the sound quality, but the air quality in terms of what you were describing is also another issue that's become unbearable. And so now the NAACP, because this is a predominantly black area that's been impacted by it, but where you're talking about isn't, but the effect is still the same. It's still the same on the people that are there in that community. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing and hearing there in that regard.
Yeah, they need a ton of space because they're so giant. So disproportionately, they're going in wherever they can find large tracts of space and where they can move quickly. And that often means steamrolling small local governments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And doing it as quickly as they can with the least guardrails unfettered, right?
Yeah.
So the job that we have is to make sure that before any conversation happens, we know that communities must have involvement, have a seat at the table and a voice, and that assurances are made and that there's teeth to contracts for what kind of power is it going to require. And the reason why, like you talked about, all this noise and this pollution from the generators is they're bringing new power online because there is enough power there. And so they're trying to do it quick and dirty, literally using diesel generators on site and other types, right? That shouldn't be happening. They could do things like talk about on-site renewables
Mm-hmm.
if they were going to move forward that we could mandate and standard require, right? And so there's examples here of rural communities where their wells were going dry. They depend on well water to live in their home that they've owned forever. This data center comes in and all of a sudden it's messing up the aquifer, and there's videos of brown water coming out of their tap and their wells are going dry, right? And these are billion-dollar capitalized projects, perhaps the most well-capitalized projects almost in the history of our economy. And yet people are being left suffering here with no one defending them materially. And that is fundamentally wrong. And this, again, is one of those areas where I think it's an emperor has no clothes moment, where people are like, wait a minute, nobody's working for me, including our current representatives in Congress.
Yeah.
And it's time to step up and demand change.
One of our listeners just asked a question on social about, she's a representative of the League of Women Voters, if I'm reading this correctly, and decided to put together a forum for candidates in September, mid-September. Maybe we'll have you back on after that so you can share with us how that went down. But apparently, so the question is, and I'm kind of muddling through this, if you think that the guy that you're running against is going to show up, and or is he going to chicken out, as he often does? That's kind of coming from a listener.
Was that the thrust of the question?
Yeah.
Man, people love to ask me that because we are different in just about every way. I don't know. I served in the military. I'm about 3 generations younger. I've got a family. He doesn't. We've got a drastically different lived experience. So people love to ask me that. And I will tell you, yes, yes, and yes. If I could have a debate every day from now until the general, I would. Right. And so we'll be there. And then our great challenge. And Glenn, if you're listening, we'll look forward to seeing you there. People want it. And it's a good opportunity to show your chops. He has 34 years of experience in Wisconsin plus federal government. So he doesn't have to be afraid of little old me.
34 years of time there. How about that? It's been
Right.
time sitting there. I like the way you threw down the gauntlet, man. But that's what people want right now. And
Right.
we have another listener, Justin, that says, "Woohoo, go Brad! Excited to see you kick Glenn out on November 3rd." So there you go, and we've got folks that are behind you and want to see you succeed in winning, but also want to see you get there and as I use my phrase often, knock over some tables and get some stuff done for the people that help you get there. So we're really excited for you. How can folks find you? How can they get involved in your campaign? Because Brett, I'm looking at it like this. I don't care if the person's in Miami or if they're in Seattle or if they're anywhere in between across the country. We want to reach people to have them be able to help all of our candidates that are running, even if it's not a race in their own state. So how can folks find you?
Thank you, Richard. And thank you for having me. This was a huge support in that direction, right? So you can find me online, have a website at bradsmith4, Congress.com, bradsmith4congress.com, or also on social media, most all channels, Brad Smith for Congress. And the way you can get involved and help, there's a volunteer link on our website under Get Involved. And best thing you can do is just share your information on One Step if you happen to be in the area, or even remotely. We can do things like phone banking, you name it. So share your info. We've got a team, 300-400 so far, all grassroots, who are doing this. If you're able to, share socials, help amplify our message to drive awareness. And if you have a couple coins that you can throw in the till, that's hugely helpful, because we're doing this ethically, financially. And so I'm not using corporate PAC donations. I've made a pledge to overturn Citizens United, as well as make active stock trading illegal for people in office. So we're doing this under our own power, and we're being effective and successful. But obviously, it's a lot harder road to go down when you're trying to do it that way. So donations are always helpful and meaningful.
Well, Brad, it's been great having you on the show this morning. Thanks for taking some time to hang out with us a little bit. We'll do this again. I'm committed to getting every Democrat that's running across the finish line in the House, the Senate, state legislators, and all the rest, because it's time for our team to take back over so we can move our country in a better direction. So thanks for being with us this morning.
I'm honored. Thank you so much for having me, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Stay safe. Be well.